Give me a second. Hello, good morning, everybody. So just give me a second. I will just update my platforms here. Okay, so our topic today, by the way, good morning in the US and good evening in the Philippines, and anybody around the world who are interested to coming to the US to work on a J1 visa program. So ang topic natin ngayon is basically all about J1 visa. And again, depending on our time, I may be able to accommodate other calls. So if you have questions, please write them down in the comment section and I'll try to answer them as much as I can. So, guys, thank you very much. So, we have one from Isabela, Philippines. So, thank you, guys. And from Australia. And again, so shout out lang kayo kung saan kayo watching from now. So, I'm just waiting for others to join us. This will be a very quick Facebook Live just to give updates on the J1 visa program, in particular, the 2-year home residency requirement. So, if you have questions around the waiver and all that, I might be able to accommodate them. So again, just try to write your questions in the comments section. So for the knowledge of everybody who are not very familiar with the J1 visa, so okay, meron tayong taga Maryland, taga Cebu, mga Bisaya. Thank you for watching. Right? I cannot see the names. It only shows Facebook user. So that's fine. So again, our topic today is basically all about J1 visa. So for those who are actually not familiar with the J1 visa, so the J1 visa is an exchange visitor visa program where non-US citizens or non-immigrants are coming to the US for several activities, which includes the teachers and all other professionals. And then they were given the opportunity to understand and experience how it is living, working in the United States, and hoping that they would be able to learn from that, and then they go home to their home country and then apply what they learn. In the process, you're also sharing your cultural um, practices to the community in the United States, right? So, in the case of the teachers, you are sharing your knowledge and skills and methodology and your culture in particular to the US students. Okay, so again, meron tayo, isa lang yung pangalan nakikita ko dito, si Ronaida. Hello, ma'am. And so yeah, we'll talk about the extreme hardship waivers. So we have a question here. Is it okay to stay in the US while you are in the process of the exceptional hardship waiver? So again, you could stay, but there's still risks involved with regards to will you be able to get a waiver approval while you are still in status? It really depends on what is your basis of the exceptional hardship waiver then. No, so if you are married to a US citizen, then it may be worthwhile to take the risk of being out of status while waiting for your waiver because you are married to a US citizen. However, if you are married to a green card holder or if the basis of your waiver is having a US citizen child, then it might be too risky for you because if you'll be incurring unlawful presence and even if the waiver is approved, you may not be able to obtain your H-1B or green card, be able to file your green card application. So, dahil wala kong formal topic today, I will just basically be talking about or answering your questions based on the comments that I see. Okay? So then we'll talk about, hindi naman masyadong marami ang policy updates, but we'll just clarify on people who are actually going home to complete their 2-year home residence requirements. So again, for people who are not very familiar with the J1 visa, how the J1 visa works is that once you are approved, and I'm talking about the exchange visitor program in particular for the teachers, right? So initially, you are given the 3-year home residence, the 3-year initial validity of the J1 visa, and then after that, it's up to your employer and the J1 sponsor if they are going to give you the 2-year extension. I would say 99% of those applicants are actually able to extend to another 2 years, giving them the maximum 5 years total validity of the J1 visa. After that, you have to go home for 2 years before you can come back either on a J1 visa, H1B, or a green card. Right? So yun yung magiging proseso ng J1 visa natin. However, there are ways to waive that. One of them is the exceptional hardship waivers. So maraming basihan ang pag-waive, but the common ones were the exceptional hardship, the no objection statement, yun yung pinaka-common na dalawa, no? The IGA, the Interested Government Agency, at one point, the Bureau of Indian Education has opened that, but since in September, they actually advised us that they will stop the process because ang dami na rin nag-apply. Okay, so simulan na tayo, no? So, Daylan, I'm planning to waive by 2 years through the no objection pathway. Is it possible? So again, we know already that the EVP Philippines has published their processes, procedures, and requirements when it comes to the no objection statement application as a form of a waiver. But at the same time, their approval rating is very low. Number one reason is that the Philippine government still supports or still had a stance na they will support the J1 visa program. It means that after your 5 years, you have to go home and spend 2 years in the Philippines or kung saan nyo nakuha yung visa nyo. So example, if you obtain your J1 visa in Thailand, then you have two options of either completing the 2-year home residency requirement in Thailand or in the Philippines. But if the question is it possible to file an objection statement? Definitely, right? But what is your rate of approval? It really depends on your basis of the application and the strength of your argument. So, based on the published guidelines of the EVP, they have the likelihood to approve your application if you have very strong support for project proposals or ito yung sinasabi natin meritorious studies, no? Or if you actually are eligible for humanitarian grounds. So based on my experience, yun yung medyo mataas ang approval rating ng EVP based on the no objection statement. Another question here. Regarding EVP's denied NOS waiver request, is there a good news or changes? So just like what we said, no, the way it is now, mas nagiging stricto ang Philippine government with regards to issuing waivers based on NOS. Based again on what I've seen in practice, they have the tendency to approve an application if it is based on humanitarian grounds or if you actually have a meritorious project that could actually support the interest of the Philippine government. So again, I will not discourage you from applying. Do your best if you think that you are actually doing some projects in the US now that you think could benefit the Department of Education or any of the member of the AVP, then I will recommend that you submit that application. So again guys, no, nagbabasa lang ako dito. Okay, congratulations Sir Eden. Talk to you soon. So, married to a US citizen. Yeah. So, again, eligibility requirements lang natin for the exceptional hardship. If you are married to a US citizen or you have a green card holder spouse, then you could actually use that to apply for exceptional hardship. So, having a US citizen child is also a ground to apply for the exceptional hardship waiver. But based on the trends now, it is very difficult to get an approval based on a US citizen child unless you have a child with a medical condition, right? So it's sad that the approval is leaning towards if you have a child with a problem on the medical condition side. But again, this is exceptional hardship waivers, right? They are looking for exceptional hardships. So if your baby is healthy, of course, we are happy to hear that. But for purposes of the waiver application, it doesn't really help much, no, on the argument. Um, Do we need a waiver if we will be extended to 2 years? No, you don't need a waiver if ang goal mo lang is to extend to 2 years, right? But you will need a waiver if you want to go beyond 5 years. Is it possible to apply for a J1 visa without having our FCE first? Um, J1 visa, ang alam ko kasi the J1 visa generally doesn't go to a law office, right? So you are supported or your documentation is assisted by the J1 sponsor. And normally they would require an FCE kasi titingnan nila kung yung ano mo ba, yung kurso mo ba is equivalent to a US degree, right? Yun yung purpose ng FCE mo. So to answer the question, yes, I would recommend that you have your FCE first, even you are going to the route of the J1 visa or an H1B. Can I spend my 2-year residency in another country or should I be in the Philippines? So just like what I said, right? So if you obtain your J1 visa in the Philippines, then you have to spend your 2 years in the Philippines. But if you actually obtain your J1 visa, let's say in Thailand or Indonesia, then you can go back to Thailand or Indonesia or in the Philippines to complete your 2-year home residency. Is it possible to get a visa even if you are not done with your 2-year home residency? Malabo, right? So, in particular, pag kunwari, so the reason why pinapauwi kayo in your home country of residence after your 2 years is basically to spend physically, you have to be physically present in that home country, right? So, based on our experience, if you are subject to the 212E and you are still complying with your 2 years, malabong ma-approve ka on any other type of visa. As a matter of fact, even if you are in the United States on a J1 visa, you are prohibited from changing status to, especially for the H1B visa or the L1 visa, multinational executive. So even if the rule says that it doesn't include the tourist visa or the student visa, pag nag-a-apply ka doon, hahanapan ka pa rin ng waiver. Of course, there's a way of arguing that. But to answer the question, it's very difficult to get another visa if you are still complying with your 2-year home residency requirement. So just focus on the 2-year, complying that, then apply for a different type of visa when you come back. Grace, at may salary deduction po kayo at magkano po ang magastos sa agency niyo? Ma'am, wala kami salary deduction because we don't process naman your salary, right? So once you are actually hired, you are considered a direct hire of, I mean, administratively, your employer will process your compensation and benefits. So very good question, Aliano, no? So it used to be, waivers used to be 6 months to 9 months. So I think mayroon beses dun sa page natin na, attorney, we've consulted with you before last year and you said that if we are planning to apply for a J1 waiver, it is best that we will apply it after our 3rd year or once our 2-year extension has been approved. But that was a time when J1 visa waiver processing could take 6 months, 9 months, or just even 14 months, right? So, applicable pa yun. But if you've been following me on social media, the latest approval rating or processing time of J1 waivers now is becoming 24 months, 30 months, 31, 35 months. So, it's becoming almost 3 years. So that's why if you actually have a ground for a waiver application, you might consider having or starting that conversation if you're eligible for a waiver. Can a school district do to help J1 visa in filing exceptional hardship? No. The school district, I mean, exceptional hardship waivers are personal waiver applications. You don't even need anything from your employer if you are actually applying for the exceptional hardship. But for the no objection statement, there is one document that you need from your employer. There is that certificate of eligibility, right? Na nag-comply kayo na or you've been working for them for X number of years, right? So to answer your question, no, there is nothing that the district can do to support your NOS or exceptional hardship waiver application. Ano po updated requirements for returning J1 visa po? So, paki-specify lang ng question. I don't think that's a very generic question. My other plan is to get a student visa sa Canada and study there. So you can do that, but it doesn't comply with the 2-year home residency requirement. It means that once you decide to go back to the US, babalikan ka pa rin to the issue of have you complied with the 2-year home residency requirement. Just asking if J1 visa kasama po ba ang asawang anak? Yes. Your spouse definitely is part of the J1. They're called J2 dependents, and then they can work while in the US, but only children below 21 years old who are unmarried can go with you on a J1 visa or even in H1B. No? And in the case of the J1, ang dependents are called J2 and they can work if they are approved of a work permit. Unlike the H1 dependents, right? Ang tawag doon H4, they cannot work while in the United States. I am already on my second J1. Na-comply ko na po ang 2-year home residency requirement. Pwede po ba ma-convert ang J1 to H1B ko even though subject pa rin ako? Okay, let me understand the question, right? So, you came in on your first J1, you went home, you comply with the 2-year home residency requirement, bumalik ka on your second J1, and you're asking if you could convert that into an H1B or potentially green card, but you're still subject to the 212E. The answer is no, right? So dahil bumalik ka on a J1, then you are still subject to the 212E. You need another waiver on the second J1, or you have to go back again and comply with the 2-year home residence requirement. So that's why people who are consulted with our office, we really encourage them na now that you know better the J1 visa at umuwi ka to comply as much as possible, don't come back on a J1. So I would recommend that you start before kayo umuwi ng first J1 nyo, nakinausap nyo na yung employer if they are actually interested to bringing you back either on a green card process or an H1B. So that's basically the advice we were actually giving to our clients or school districts. And most of them, ganun naman naging strategy nila. Before they went home, we already started the green card process for them such that pagbalik nila 2 years later, hindi na sila J1 but they could be on a green card route. Is it possible for a J1 dependent to have a different type of visa once in the US? If they are not subject to the 212E, then they could basically change to another visa status, just like the F1 or the student visa. So again, even yung mga anak nyo na on a J2 and they are subject to the 212E, but they will be turning 21 years old and they are yung parent nila are still having 2 years, 3 years validity on the J1, they could successfully convert into the student visa. No, and if you need help on that, you can actually call our office and have a consultation. Hello, Miss Waddle. Thank you for watching. So just to share the predicaments with the most J1 teachers as we undergone process where we spent a reasonable amount of money to be able to go to the US, even our airfare. Do you have an idea, attorney, of some ways to persuade the AVP committee to give less stringent pathways to those people who haven't received enough support from the government along the J1 visa program? So to be fair with the Philippine government, though, and even the people who are actually representing the polo offices, both in Washington, D.C. and LA, they've been hearing your feedback naman, no? And the thing is, it is the nature of the visa. So again, the J1 visa is a result of an agreement between the US government and the Philippine government. Kasi nga exchange visitor program siya, di ba? And part of their agreement is really to protect that program, no? And that program was really designed for participants to go home to their home country and spend the 2 years. Okay? At one point, naging lax ang Philippine government, right? Based on their policies, way back before they actually changed that in 2020, before the pandemic. Even if you are married to a US citizen or a green card holder, or if you have a US citizen child, automatically they will approve your visa waiver application. So your waiver visa application, right? But at one point, ang daming nag-qualify doon and the government looked at it as an abuse of the J1 visa program, which could be looked at that way. No? So parang ganito lang din yan. People come to the US on a tourist visa and then a number of them doesn't want to go back to their home country and then they changed to the student visa. Then the US government look at that as, oh, you are abusing the student visa process or changing from tourist visa to the student visa. Then they put more stringent rules and regulations. So parang ganun din ang J1, right? So kaya nga sinasabi natin, if you have the option when you are talking to your employer and you are at the liberty to discuss with them that, hey, can I have an H1B over a J1 visa, then have that conversation. Kasi pag tinanggap mo yung J1 visa na yun, sa contract nyo pa lang, you already agreed that you will be going home after 5 years unless you will obtain a waiver. And as a matter of fact, your contract with your J1 sponsor prohibits you from changing status or applying a waiver, else they will cancel your J1 visa. So, naintindihan ko kung ano yung concern ng teachers, but at the end of the day, it is the terms of the J1 visa that you agreed to in the first place. No? Kasi if you don't want to go home, then don't take the J1 visa. No, kung kaya mo namang i-negotiate sa employer mo na mag-H1B kayo. I hope I answered that question. So again, just to close that question, the EVP is giving you the opportunity to waive that waiver if you will comply with the requirements, right? So, but we all agree that medyo mahirap ang requirements ng EVP Philippines. How many times can we come to the US with J1 visa? Unlimited ba ito as long as you comply with the 2-year home residence? So, yeah. So, to answer the question, I don't think there's a limit for anybody to come back on a J1 visa. But on the practical side, I don't think that's a good strategy, right? Because you will always go back to square one. So, but if you're happy with that, coming on a J1, yeah, you may. And there is no limit on the number of applications. I have an existing tourist visa which will expire in 27. While I am a J1 at present, can I still reapply my tourist visa? So then again, if your J1 visa is subject to the 212E, then you may not be able to renew. And if you're going to be applying, then your chance of approval may be slim if you are still complying with the 2-year home residence requirement. However, there are cases where we see na naka-J1 sila pero hindi kina-cancel or nire-revoke yung tourist visa application, visa stamps nila, and after their J1 visa, they were able to use their tourist visa applications. It may be risky, but it happens. No? So we've seen that with some of our clients. Can I self-petition while complying with the 2-year home residency requirement? Well, if you would qualify for the O1 extraordinary ability or the national interest waiver, yes, you may. But it's a very long conversation. I would recommend that you consult with an immigration lawyer to see your eligibility or chance of approval using the self-petition. But to answer the question, yes, you can. Hi, Ms. Moss. If the J2 will join the J1 visa holder during the extension, is it possible? Yes. They will be subject to the same terms as the J1 visa holder, correct? So again, for as long as they are below 21 years old and they are unmarried, they could apply for the J2 visa and join the J1 visa holder. May I ask po, BEd major in SPED in the may I ask if BEd major in SPED is the same with BS SPED? Can BEd major in SPED apply for H1B? So BEd or BS Ed major in SPED is not equivalent to bachelor's in SPED, right? So West Visayas or WIMSU, West Visayas University, is actually now offering bachelor's in SPED, no? So, hindi pwede ang major in SPED lang for H1B purposes, but they will qualify on the J1 visa. So, wala kasing requirement ang master's degree for a J1 visa holder to be able to teach SPED in the United States, right? But if you're targeting H1B, you must have a bachelor's in SPED or master of arts, major in SPED to qualify for H1B. Hello sa taga Montana dyan. Okay, so any other question? Basically, the latest policy updates lang, ang sinasabi lang niya is while you are complying with the 2-year home residence requirement, right? And alam ko na people still would want to actually aspire to work abroad, knowing the economic conditions in the Philippines and their ability to find gainful employment after they were in a J1 visa. Because again, there's no guaranteed position for them to go back to go when they go back to the in the Philippines, right? So when you apply for the J1 visa, you actually resign from your post in the Department of Education or from any private employer. So after your term on the J1 visa, wala ka nang babalikan, right? At kung may babalikan ka naman, maramdaman mo yung difference ng sweldo mo or kita mo on a J1 visa while in the US or yung sweldo mo in the Philippines. So, you are still not excused to comply with the 2 years. So, pag kunwari, may mga nagtatanong dito, pwede ba ako magtrabaho sa Australia or Canada or kasaan man, but I obtained my J1 visa in the Philippines. So, what the policy is saying is, kunwari, nagbabakasyon kayo sa Philippines while you were in Canada, right? And you spent in the Philippines for 1 month or 2 months, bumalik ka ulit, you could still count those days while you are in the Philippines in the aggregate. Ibig sabihin, pwede mong i-add-add siya, hindi man siya tuloy-tuloy. Pag lumagpas ka na sa 2 years, then you already have complied with a 2-year home residence requirement. Even if nasa labas ka ng Pilipinas while you are complying with a 2-year home residence requirement. Does that make sense? Okay, so again, the general rule is after ng J1 visa mo, you have to go back to the Philippines if you obtain your J1 visa in the Philippines. If you obtain your J1 visa in Thailand, then you have two options. You can comply with the 2 years in Thailand or in the Philippines. But let us just say na nakuha mo yung J1 mo in the Philippines and you don't want to go back in the Philippines after your J1 visa program and you decided to actually work in Canada instead. But for the time being, so doon sa 2 years na yon or 3 years na yon or 4 years na yon, bumabalik-balik ka sa Philippines, you spend 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months, pwede mong i-add yung lahat ng stay mo in the Philippines and if it's already equivalent to 2 years, then pwede mo na rin siyang gagamitin na na-comply mo na yung 2 years na yon. There is no requirement that the 2 years is tuloy-tuloy. So, pwede siyang increment, pwede siyang aggregate of i-add mo lang yung total number of stay mo in the Philippines. So may mga nagpahabol pa na questions dito, so sagutin na natin. Are Filipino guidance counselors qualified to practice in the US? Yes. So we've already had deployed some guidance counselors in schools in the US, but there are some states that require them to get certification. Okay? So, you need to check kung saan kayong state balak magtrabaho and see kung ano yung regulatory, kung may licensing requirements ba to be able to work as guidance counselors. But to answer the question, yes, there are people who work as guidance counselors Filipino guidance counselors in the US. MA in Teaching Science, can it be considered for H1B? Um, you don't need a master's degree to be able to teach science. So again, if you are good in science and it's a very highly in demand specialty in the US, then you could basically teach in the United States on H1B or a J1 visa. Miss Waddle, at yung J1 visa pwede apply to come in the US to enroll for school? No. The J1 visa, ma'am, is not for attending school. It's basically to work as an exchange visitor. Okay? And hindi lahat ng professions pasok sa J1. Depende yun sa skills list. And medyo madami-dami ang skills in the Philippine na allowed. How about nagtuturo sa colony? Is there a way para mag-file ng waiver? Can you elaborate more on a colony, ma'am? Ang very common kasi sa amin is tribes, right? So, I'm not familiar with the colonies. So, you mean the colonies, territories, and colonies? Right? So you mean US Virgin Islands, yung mga ganon? Yes, they are still eligible to apply for waivers if that's what you're referring to. When is the right time to apply for another teaching position in the US while waiting for the completion of the 2 year? Is it after the first year, or do we have to wait until 24 months is completed? When is the right time to apply for another teaching position in the US while waiting for the completion of the 2 year home residency? Is it, okay. So is it after the first year, or do we have to wait until the 4 year? So, very good question, and it's a very common question. So, ganito lang naman yun, okay? So, if you are subject to the 212E, and then umuwi ka sa Philippines, as much as you would want to apply again, the question is, yung employer mo ba willing to wait for you for 1 year or 2 years? So chances are, hindi, right? Because when we deal with school districts, gusto nila yung teacher nila darating ng bukas eh. Because the teachers are highly needed in their school. So hindi pa kami naka-encounter ng mga school districts who are willing to wait 1 year, but there are school districts who are willing to wait 4 months, 6 months, kasi wala talaga silang makita, right? So to answer your question, I think it is best to apply when you're already 6 months before completing your 2 year home residence requirement. So if the schools are open in August, I think you can start attending interviews in January, February. Just let your employer know that your 2 year home residence requirement will be June in July na magtapos. Then the interview can happen after the 2 year home residence requirement is complied with. What if attorney during the program, nagbakasyon ka sa Pilipinas, pwede po bang ma-count yun? Very good question to, no? So the regulation actually didn't specify na pwede bang i-count yung pag-uwi-uwi mo sa Pilipinas during the program. But if you're going to look into the intent of the law, ang 2 year home residency requirement is a requirement after you finish the program. Okay? So, if I'm gonna read the implementing rules, again, hindi rin nila in-specify na pwede mong i-count yon. But to be on the safer side, because you could be denied at the US Embassy, okay? Start counting those days na umuwi ka sa Philippines after your program ended. Kasi kung during yun, I don't think that complies. Personal ko lang opinion yun. I don't think that counts towards the counting of the 2 year home residence requirement. The rules are not very clear on this particular issue. Sagutin ko lang to pa ulit. So, the additional update on this 2 year home residency, right? So, kunwari lang, for purposes of conversation, right? Umuwi ka sa Philippines but you only spend hours in the Philippines, hindi talaga yung complete day, right? So, kunwari, ano ka lang, anong tawag dyan? Nag-layover ka lang ng few hours in the Philippines, then you fly out of the Philippines after that, they are going to count that as 1 day. So, that's good news. That still would count to the aggregate 2 years mo na bumisita ka sa Philippines. Yun yung one of the latest update nila. How can we process aggregation of the saved months for the 2 year home residency? Very good question, right? So, I think the question is actually saying, how do we now prove that umuwi kami ng Philippines at bibilangin namin yun? So, maraming ways of counting that. Number one, you can actually use your passport stamps, right? Kasi sa Philippines naman, every time you go in and out of the country, ini-stamp tayo. So, that's basically enough proof for you to show na dumaan ako sa Philippines, umuwi ako doon, whether it's 1 month, 2 months, 1 day, they are going to count that in your favor. And you can use your passport stamp as evidence or proof of complying with the 2 year home residency requirement. While complying with the 2 year residency, can I apply for H1B currently without currently teaching? Well, some employers would entertain you even if you are not currently working when you are applying for H1B. Attorney, what is the better, direct hiring or with agency in applying in the US? So, it's not an easy conversation, right? Kasi marami namang nakakakuha ng H1B on direct hiring, right? Marami din naman nakakakuha ng agency. So, I think I have a Facebook Live to talk about the difference between direct hiring and agency. Kasi both sides may pros and cons. Right? The immediate advantage mo, nag-direct hire ka, wala kang babayarang placement fees. But on the other hand, pag nagkaka-problema ka, you are on your own. The good thing about naman having the agency is, pag may problema ka or may problema ang employer, they will call the agency and try to resolve it through the agency kung ano mga problema mo, right? But on the other hand, magbabayad ka ng placement fee kasi the agency mo will be answerable for you while you are on an H-1B or on a J-1 visa. So, again, you better decide which one. But basically, the distinctive difference ng dalawas, yun lang naman talaga, yung risks mo and potential liabilities mo if you are on your own or if you don't want to handle that on your own, then you will be paying the placement fees para yung agency nang bahala sa'yo pag nagkakaproblema ka. How about English subject? Hindi man po ba? Yeah. Okay. So guys, hiring season for teachers will start in January. Alam naman natin na very in demand English, LA, Science, Math, PE, lahat yun, right? Even general education are very in demand in the US. So just keep watching. Marami namang mga staffing agencies na in the Philippines trying to bring Filipino teachers to the US. Just try to select which one or which is the best agency mo kasi hindi rin lahat maayos. Okay? So, just be careful with choosing your agency. How true that home residency is just preferred but not required? I knew a business sponsor who told their teachers about this wrong information. Okay? There is such thing as you are a J1 visa holder not subject to, and that is not the control of the J1 sponsor, and that is not the control of your employer either. So, ang nagdi-determine nun is US Embassy at nilalagay nila sa DS 2019 mo if you are subject to or not subject to the 212E. So, if yung stamp mo not subject to 212E, good for you, right? You don't have to comply with the 2-year home residency requirement. Pero, pag natatakan yung passport mo ng you are subject to, you have no choice but comply with the 2 years and then or apply for a waiver. Yung mga nagtuturo po sa German school. Okay, I would recommend, ma'am, that you consult with the immigration lawyer para mapag-usapan specifically their concerns. Ano pong waiver i-apply? Again, depending on your eligibility. Maraming klase ng waiver. The most common ones were exceptional hardship, no objection statement, persecution, interested government agencies. So to answer the question, it is best that you consult with an immigration lawyer para alam nila kung anong applicable sa. Which is better to apply? Okay, tingnan sagot ko na yan. Can the ABP assist J1 teachers in finding job post back in the home country after completing the two? Are there any support from them? Since resigned, I really don't know that answer, right? But I don't think that's their job either, right? Kasi, again, guys, when you signed the J1 visa, it was your willingness to sign that contract because part of the requirement is for you to resign. You agreed on that. There is also no requirement in that contract, as much as I'm aware of, that the government will be responsible finding jobs for you. Okay? So alam ko yung frustration nyo, right? But let's be practical here, right? It is your choice to come to the US as a J1, and then when you come back, there is nothing na guaranteed for you. I understand, again, I understand where you're coming from. But I don't think, even on an H1 or being a green card holder, if you decide to go back home, the government's not responsible to find work for you. That's our job as citizens, as professionals, as human beings to find jobs for ourselves. Okay. Attorney, which is better, applying for US in teaching direct, or I think I answered that question. Be it social studies and Master of Science Social Studies with SPED units. Pwede po ba? Okay, if the question is, will you be able to teach social studies? Definitely. It doesn't require a master's degree. If you have a master's degree, good for you, right? So you will still benefit from the salary increases, adjustments, and that will also give you an edge over other applicants. Will you qualify for SPED? No, because you have to be a bachelor's in SPED or MA in SPED to be able to teach SPED on H-1B. Did I hear it correctly that you mentioned that NOS also has humanitarian grounds? If so, what are these humanitarian grounds? Kagaya ng sinasabi ko kanina, they are most likely to approve an application if the ground for humanitarian reasons is the medical condition of the child or of the qualifying relative or the applicant mismo. No? So again, if you want to discuss more on that, I would recommend that you consult with an immigration lawyer. Okay? How about yung mag-expire na next year, but kasi po yung naka-file ang waiver to switch it to K1 visa since nagpakasal po sa you mean the spouse visa. Hindi po patapos yung process. Okay, so ito yung sinasabi ko na if you are married to a US citizen, there is an exception that even if mawalan ka ng status or if you actually work without authorization, the fact that you are married to a US citizen, then that will not be a problem for your green card application later for as long as your waiver application is approved. Okay? So, balikan ko lang, i-dissect lang natin yung question na to. Pag nag-expire ba yung J1 visa mo but pending pa yung waiver application mo, but you are married to a US citizen, papauwiin ka ba? So, based on our practice, wala pa kaming nakita na dineport yung applicant simply because nag-expire yung J1 visa pending the waiver application. But ang advice ko in general on this situation though is you will be more informed as to what directions to take or what is the best strategy for you if you will consult with an immigration lawyer and then doon yung pag-usapan kung what's best for you. Okay? Kasi there's risk. There is a risk of, okay, again, depending on how strong the waiver application is, you may take the risk of saying, okay, since I'm married to a US citizen, I would rather stay here and be out of status. Anyway, malakas naman yung argument ko sa waiver. So once the waiver is approved, you can apply, you can get your green card regardless of your unlawful presence or an unauthorized work kasi nga you are married to a US citizen. Pero kung ang ground ng waiver mo is persecution or NOS or based on a US citizen child or based on being married to a green card holder, that's a different story kasi working without authorization or being unlawfully present could actually affect your next application even if your waiver is approved. So then again, I would recommend that you consult with a lawyer at that point. Is it necessary po ba to teach here in the Philippines while 2 year home? No, not necessarily though. You just have to be physically present in your home country or the last country of residence. How particular are your schools in the verticalization of degrees? So, again, master's degree, PhD, hindi naman talaga siya requirement to apply to teach in the US except for SPED. But what we are saying is, kung may mga advanced degrees ka nga, no, it could benefit you, it give you an edge, right? But I don't think they are very particular with verticalization of degrees though. No? So may mga benefits lang siya. So again, on the immigration side, for as long as you have a bachelor's degree, you have a PRC license or teaching license, then you would be able to get an H1B. If hindi H1B ang ano mo, ang punteriya mo, J1, you don't need to have a master's degree. But having master's or doctorate degree could help you with your salary or adjustment or promotions. I would say that. But again, I'm just talking about the regulatory, sorry, the immigration process here. No? So how it works internally in the scheme of things while you're already at school, that we don't dwell too much time on. Can you help me find a school for H1B as I work in New Mexico in my third year? Abraham, there are, again, if you're following our posts or our pages, there are posts there, but you could basically send a message to our page, IDRIM Staffing, or the new Filipino teachers in the US, and submit your credentials. We might be able to find some opportunities for you, Abdel Hamed. Regarding EVPs denying NOS waivers, is there any good news or changes? I think I answered that question already. No? Is it required for teachers who serve 2 years to teach in home country? No. Is it possible to apply exceptional hardship while waiting for the results of the NOS? Yes. May na-approve na ba na NOS from the VP? Yes. Again, just like what we said, we generally don't assist NOS in the Philippines except kung ang lumapit sa amin is due to humanitarian grounds. Kasi either may sakit yung anak nila or may sakit yung asawa nila or yung applicant mismo may sakit. those are the NOS applications that we accept. But other NOS applications, no, we don't accept those. We encourage them to check the website of the AVP kasi very clear naman ang guidelines at saka procedure nila. So, again, guys, it's been a pleasure talking to you for an hour today. I will be doing more of this Facebook Live because medyo matagal na rin ako nag-Facebook Live. Hindi lang nakafocus sa teachers yung magiging topics ko in the coming days, but it's related to US immigration in general. So again, I know it's weekday. It's very difficult for teachers in the US to attend, but for people who are able to join with me today, and especially young people outside the US, thank you very much. So if you have other topics that you would want me to touch on in my next Facebook Live, just let me know. No, ako or my staff will be reading your comments. At kung hindi ko nasagot dito, we might be able to answer your question. Or if you would want to actually discuss in more details the situation you could always send us a message. So again, guys, maraming salamat. Thank you and advance Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone. Bye-bye.